Now, time for some business news. And India's finance minister says the country of more than 1 billion people is showing signs of a turnaround. Presenting the federal budget, Pranab Mukherjee predicts that economic growth will be 7.5%. That's better than last year, but still lower than previous predictions. He also pledged to bring down the budget deficit, partly by cutting food and fuel subsidies. That's on top of a hike in passenger fares announced in the railway budget earlier this week. And he's thrown a lifeline to the country's struggling private airlines, allowing them to borrow up to $1 billion from foreign investors. Well, Chetan Sharma is a financial journalist based in New Delhi, and he joins us now live from London, where he is at the moment. Thank you for speaking to us. So investors don't think the Indian government is serious about cutting the budget deficit. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, when you use the word turnaround, it seems very dramatic, and that certainly isn't the case. You know, in India, as opposed to any place in the world, the budget is far beyond a statement of account. It's very well a political flashpoint, and more so in the current circumstances, where a political deficiency and a weak political system, considering the drubbing that the ruling alliance has got in the recent elections, means that their hands have been curtailed to take any decisions. Now, typically in circumstances like these, you have two options. A, that you try and salvage your position and be populist. B, you try and go the whole hog and be reformist. But the government this time has been just what it's been for a long, long time, and that's been ineffective and done nothing at all. And they've played it safe and not taken any hard decisions. Now, there are three areas where the government can really act. First, of course, it will be in case of inflation, the high inflation. And to stem that, they have not done anything substantial. Of course, you can argue a lot of it comes from the external factors like rising oil prices. India, of course, imports 70% of its oil prices, and food. And they haven't done anything much on that. There's nothing to suggest that this could come down. So that's a failure, point A. In terms of a turnaround of growth, that seems, well, highly implausible, given the fact that they had an opportunity to cut interest rates and promulgate growth. They haven't been able to do that. So there's nothing really reformist out there. Neither has there been any encouragement to FDI. The third, of course, where they have done something well and substantial has been an attempt to control the fiscal deficit. Here, they've increased taxes, they widened the tax net, which really is a positive. It's a tough call, but a good one to take from the economic point of view. And the second good thing they've done is to promise at least to curtail this, the entire subsidy to 2% of the GDP, which really is very, very praiseworthy.
Okay, and as you said, the government took a hit in those recent state polls, and after the corruption scandals, the government's been left weak to be able to do much more than it has announced. There are general elections set for 2014, I believe, and next year's budget is expected to be full of populist spending. Do you think this year's budget was the last one for it to try and cut that burgeoning deficit?
Well, that's of course, Shakul, is the assumption. It will be in 2014. A lot of people perhaps predict that it could be earlier. You could have a midterm polls and the government wouldn't go the whole term. So that, of course, is also something you've got to take into consideration. But I don't think the government can afford to be populist, and they certainly haven't been in this budget, to their credit. They have tried to take some hard measures, and even when they play safe, they played against the allies. Now, of course, the big thing to watch out for is whether they'll be successful. They have called for a hike in rail fares, whether it's going to be allowed given the stance of the government in West Bengal. Perhaps it's not entirely the case. They have called for a reduction in subsidies, which of course would hurt the poor at some stage, but it would be a good economic decision if they're able to push through the effectiveness, because most of this, which all of us know, goes through the hands of corruption and therefore proves to be rather ineffective. So more than taking any hard steps, they've got to try and make systemic things happen, which really hasn't been the intent so far.
And Chetan, before you go, India is a fast-growing, big economy. Why hasn't that economic growth trickled down to the poorest in the country?
Well, that's exactly. A is corruption. B is the subsidies that have been doled out have been not cash subsidies. They've been ineffective subsidies which haven't reached the people that they should, which means that there is a systemic failure. And the third thing, perhaps, is that the tax rationalization has been more skewed towards benefiting a lot of people which don't require it, like in terms of agriculture tax, where even the rich farmers are exempted, which certainly isn't fair. The second part of it is that we need to widen the tax bracket and include a lot of other people to be paying taxes, even if they are belonging to somewhat the lower middle class. Of course, broadening the tax and making it more effective towards the rich factor and perhaps taxing them a little more. So there is some kind of an inefficiency in the system as well as a lopsided tax structure which creates problems like this. And of course, corruption is the major factor that has to be overruled. But these things don't happen overnight. Okay. But certainly we need steps and a hard amount of reformist steps to try and stem that, which hasn't been the case, unfortunately, at least in this budget.
Chetan Sharma, thank you very much for your time. Well, Iran's financial isolation is about to get much worse. From Saturday, dozens of Iranian